Bearer shares were once a favorite tool of the offshore world. They offered complete anonymity and could be easily bought or sold, 100% anonymously. But, like most tricks of the offshore world, they've almost entirely disappeared. Between 2000 and 2019, increasing pressure from the OECD and other regulatory bodies forced offshore hubs to eliminate bearer shares completely. Today, the only bearer shares available are a fraction of their former selves. They're shunned by banks, hated by tax authorities, come with special penalties, and should be avoided almost 100% of the time. This video will give you the complete rundown on bearer shares, why they were loved, how they were used, and even how you can still use them today. Plus, we'll tell you why you really shouldn't and what you should do instead. But before diving in, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get alerted every time we post new bank account opening opportunities. Here at GlobalBanks, we help individuals and businesses unlock the benefits of international banking by helping them find and open accounts with the best banks around the world. Before we get started, we have a free business banking starter guide designed to help non-resident and offshore companies open bank accounts all around the world. So don't forget to download your free copy using the link in the description below. Mapping the use of bearer shares today. Prior to the war on bearer shares and global obsession with transparency, you used to be able to set up a company and choose between holding your shares as registered shares or bearer shares. This was true in pretty much every structuring jurisdiction. Just as a note, we use the term structuring jurisdiction intentionally. Bearer shares were not just an instrument of offshore finance, they were popular across many developed countries and major financial centers around the world. In fact, the downfall of bearer shares didn't begin until the year 2000. That's when the OECD started pressuring jurisdictions to eliminate them. If not, they'd be promptly thrown on a blacklist which would destroy their economy. Today, only a handful of countries permit bearer shares. But these bearer shares have severe limitations and are best avoided in almost all circumstances. Essentially, there are two types of bearer shares, mobile and immobilized. Mobile bearer shares refer to the traditional bearer shares which offered 100% anonymity and flexibility. But there is no country in the world that still offers mobile bearer shares. Today, if you want bearer shares, the only option is to hold immobilized bearer shares. Let's take a closer look. Understanding bearer shares. Mobile bearer shares have been wiped off the face of the planet. They no longer exist. Anyone that says otherwise is either lying, misinformed, or hasn't updated their website since 2019. Immobilized bearer shares are, on the other hand, alive and well. Still available in a few remaining jurisdictions, but they come at a cost and in almost all instances should be avoided. So, what are mobile bearer shares? Mobile bearer shares refer to unregistered securities which are owned by whoever has the physical share documents in their possession. Literally, the owner of the bearer shares is whoever holds the physical share certificates. There is no public or private registry of the ownership, nor is there a record of any transfers of ownership. That means if the owner loses or misplaces those shared documents, they own nothing. If you give those shared documents to your grandmother owns the company. If your neighbor steals those shared documents from your vault, your neighbor instantly becomes a new owner of your company. You get where I'm going with this. It's all about possession of physical shared documents. But, as mentioned, mobile bearer shares no longer exist and have been completely eliminated from all offshore jurisdictions. Today, the last remaining holdout in the bearer shares family is the immobilized bearer share. So, what are immobilized bearer shares? Immobilized bearer shares refer to securities that are held in custody for the owner by a registered agent, typically a licensed provider in the country of registration. At the time of custody, the name of the ultimate beneficial owner is recorded along with the shares, providing a sworn record of the true owner. In other words, immobilized bearer shares are not much different than holding registered shares in a country with a private corporate registry. Risks and challenges of bearer shares. If you're considering owning a company through bearer shares, you need to know the pitfalls and challenges that you're going to face. In this part of the video, that's exactly what we'll cover, including some of the most pressing challenges and inconveniences that arise when using bearer shares. Taxation related to bearer shares. Bearer shares are demonized by governments. They're typically cited as a force for evil, enabling criminals, terrorists, and tax evaders to remain anonymous while skirting regulators and authorities. So it's no surprise that most countries have banned bearer shares altogether. But a few enterprising nations have taken a different approach, turning the global crackdown into a profitable opportunity, providing business owners with privacy and generating new tax revenue in the process. For example, Panama charges a 20% tax on dividends distributed to owners of Panama corporations who hold ownership via bearer shares instead of registered shares. In other words, if you really want to use bearer shares, no problem, but it comes at a price. Custody of bearer shares. As discussed, immobilized bearer shares are shares that are held in custody with a registered agent, lawyer, or other licensed professional. So, naturally, if you plan on owning a company through bearer shares, you need to trust the lawyer or agent that will be taking custody of them implicitly. And unfortunately, in many backwater jurisdictions, there are higher ratios of licensed professionals with low standards that should be avoided. Bearer shares and bank account opening. Now, let's talk banking. If you're setting up a company, there's a strong possibility that you'll need to open a bank account at one point or another. So an important question is, can you open a bank account for a company with bearer shares? Well, the straight answer is that it's almost impossible. That's because the financial industry has turned its back on bearer shares, thanks in large part due to regulatory pressure. So instead of providing a step-by-step guide on how to open accounts for owners with bearer shares, this part of the video will instead serve as a warning. If you plan on opening a company with bearer shares, you shouldn't plan on opening bank accounts. Now, while there may be a small number of banks that are still willing to open accounts for companies with bearer shares, this is typically reserved for very high-value clients or requires opening accounts at very low-quality banks. And in most cases, if the bank does open the account, they'll require that the bearer shares be transferred to an agent of the bank. In other words, you're handing over the bearer shares to open a bank account. Alternatively, if you find a bank that allows you to open accounts for a company with bearer shares and doesn't require you to hand over custody of the shares, run in the opposite direction. Banks willing to do this in today's regulatory environment are typically in very low quality jurisdictions, do not follow international standards, and are likely going to cause a lot of headaches in the long term. Alternatives to bearer shares. Frankly, it's time to get comfortable with greater transparency. And if you're trying to achieve some of the objectives that bearer shares previously offered, there's a strong chance that 100% legal alternatives already exist. You just need to know where to look and how to find them. Number 1, anonymity or privacy. If you're after true anonymity, you're a few decades too late. The game is over. Today, the name of the game is residency and structuring, or crypto. Now, that doesn't mean that achieving a certain level of privacy is out of the question. In fact, if you want to make sure your name isn't splashed all over the internet or in public databases, that's pretty easy to do with the right approach. For example, privacy-loving folks could protect themselves with 3 possible options. 1, by registering companies in countries that do not have a public registry of shareholders, though this is starting to be phased out in many countries. 2, by holding interests, shares, indirectly through private trusts or foundations where the ultimate beneficial owners are not disclosed publicly. 3, by using a combination of trusts or foundations, along with companies registered countries that allow for privacy along with nominee directors. Of course, in most cases, there will be a private registry of the ultimate beneficial owners in all 3 of the instances I just mentioned, with some exceptions for trusts in certain jurisdictions. But the point is, options like the ones detailed previously would result in the personal details of the ultimate beneficial owner not being disclosed publicly, as long as the correct jurisdictions are used. Next, number 2, transferability. Sure, one of the major benefits afforded by bearer shares is the ability to transfer shares without any effort. And if this is a major interest, immobile bearer shares might still be attractive to you. But remember, you still have to register the new owner with the agent anyway. And on top of that, the chances of opening a bank account for the company are basically 0. That said, how difficult is it to actually sell a company? Well, that ultimately depends on the country where the company is registered. In many cases, companies can be sold without any tax trigger, stamp duty, or transfer tax. At most, there will be a small fee charged to the corporate registrar and service provider to update the beneficial owner. Number 3, closing thoughts on bearer shares alternatives. Fortunately, with careful planning, privacy and transferability can be achieved. In fact, most countries that still have private company registries, for now, also make the buying and selling of shares incredibly simple. So, whether you already own a company through bearer shares or you're considering setting up a new company, you should think about whether bearer shares make sense anymore. We don't think they do. Instead, companies with registered shares are and will continue to be better positioned to meet the increasing demands of compliance in the banking world. And those entrepreneurs and wealth owners who insist on holding bearer shares instead of registered shares risk being cut off from the financial world entirely if they haven't been already. How to open accounts for companies with bearer shares? The simple answer is you don't, at least not anymore. But if you're looking to open accounts for companies registered in international or offshore jurisdictions, we can help. In fact, foreign companies from many jurisdictions, even blacklisted and graylisted countries, can still access decent banking options. You just need to know where to look, which banks will realistically accept you, how to apply, and which bankers to contact. To start opening accounts today, you can obviously use the information that I've already shared in this video. Or you can access one of our account opening services and start taking action today. Each of our premium services are designed to help non-resident individuals, foreigners, and their businesses open international bank accounts. Whether you need personal, private, business, offshore, or even US banking, we have an account opening solution that will work for you. You can get started with GlobalBanks IQ, our international banking intelligence service. It gives you step-by-step instructions with all the tools you need to find and open accounts with top banks around the world. Plus, you'll unlock our international intelligence reports, account opening strategies, international bank database, and much more. We also have a dedicated US account opening service called GlobalBanks USA, which is 100% focused on helping non-residents, foreigners, and even foreign and offshore companies open bank accounts in the US. It involves direct one-on-one support from our team of experts and includes access to our US banking intelligence reports, US account opening strategies, and US bank database. And of course, there's our flagship service, GlobalBanks Insider. With GlobalBanks Insider, you'll get access to everything we offer, including all of the benefits in GlobalBanks IQ and GlobalBanks USA, plus our entire library of premium reports, the entire GlobalBanks database, and dedicated one-on-one support from our team of international banking experts to help you find and open the accounts you need. So, no matter where you're looking to bank in the world, you're only a few clicks away from finding and opening international accounts. To get started, just click the link in the description below to learn more about the available options. And before signing off, don't forget to hit subscribe so you get alerted every time we share new banking opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.